Grey drizzle owns the slipway. Tarry planks are tacky with dew. Gulls test the fish buckets like auditors. The whale rib rack for horns stands along the ale bench, bleached and patient. You are the newest harbor, warden's helper on ale watch, stake bag on your hip, a coil of bench cord in your fist, tally stick, and a pot of red ochre that will make friends or enemies depending on your wrist. If you like watching a rule make boats leave on time without anyone needing to shout, walk with me. Tap subscribe and ring the bell. We'll set a line that turns ale into order and brag into silence. Orders are plain because consequences aren't. Peg a cord along the ale bench. Hang the hornboard, rounds, not rants in letters fishermen can read from a shrug away. Check the crew list. Post the ban, no boasts before rowing. A farm lad mutters for courage, saying you'll row faster makes you row faster. The law speaker points his staff toward a chief who cost a tide last month boasting of 5-oar pulls. Make the silence matter. You kneel on the slick plank and draw the first chalk line down the bench edge. Peg taps, tap tap, turn, tap. The bench cord snakes under your palm, trying to find an old story. You give it a new one. Straight along the ale boards, shallow arc from horn rack to slipway step, a quiet seam marked with ochre that runs from bench to boats. Cord too tight and pride cheats. Men crowd the line to make the rule about other people. Cord too loose and courage sloshes into chaos. Shouts drift seawards before oars do. Either way, the ban must be posted before the boat's horn peels out. Peg. The boatswain rams one home with his palm, the plank answers like a drum. You measure off horn widths with your tally stick and space them on the whale ribs. Big horns next to little, oath horns painted blue at the far end, where witnesses can get close without getting wet. Linen bracers show under sealskins as men shrug off the first chill. A horn tips and ale spits along the rack. You catch it by the stop and wedge a sliver of drift under its mouth, then chalk a tiny X on your tally for later. One spit, one lesson. Hush horn, calls the law speaker, and the short conch complains the way it always does. His staff raps twice for measure kept. You plant your weight and stamp footholds at the launching way, heels where the shove will want them later. Chalk rings go down to the waterline, one at the slip, one 2 paces back where the quiet seam meets boot leather. You paint no boasts before rowing on the board, where elbows will have to look at it to fetch a drink. Hidden worlds live under your coat. Last winter's home ganga list, with barred provocations. No naming mothers by luck or skull size, no daring a man who hasn't yet warmed his hands, no goat jokes that turn wives into rivers. A spare sack of horn stops for men who think law can be drunk through. Hand signs, 2 fingers down, step, flat palm, hold, fist low, down. Pocket drill for the shove you'll teach with a tap later. Set feet, breathe, shove. The cord goes tight at the corner of the bench and tries to sing. You let it hum, then ease a peg a thumb outward where the plank curves like an old back. The law speaker's eye drops to your cord hand and stays long enough to give your knuckles manners. You make the second line of ochre from bench to boats, the quiet seam with a rule in it, round, nod, hush, then walk the seam to the skids. Nobody talks about the sea before their hands are on it. Board, says the boatswain. You hang the horn board under the whale ribs and count along the rack, tapping each mouth with your tally. White tags for table ale, blue for oath toast, yellow for water round. The first horn goes out to the nearest man with 2 fingers worth of liquid and an obligation to nod rather than narrate. A staff rap. Measure kept. A horn gets too friendly with a knee. You catch the mouth in time and sign down at the lad whose foot wants to tap. He sets it flat. He was about to say something about 6-oar shoves. He decides to remember how long it takes to tie 15 thongs instead. You log crew names on the tally board in a hand that can be read when you're not there. Prow bench, Arnie, Bjorn, Sten, mid-bench, Kettle, Fast, Stern, Tosti, Haldor. Rounds, 0, fines, 0. Oaths, none before water. Suspense sits behind your shoulder like a gull. You could draw the cord a palm closer to the rack to make the count look good. Pride would pay for it with boat talk you can't row. You could pull it back 2 paces and teach humility. Courage would spill its ale on the quiet seam and call it salt. You split the difference and write it on wood. Chalk answers to timber better than oaths do. A horn tips again. This one spits. You dab stop wax where the bore loosened and press until the red ochre remembers it is a warning, not paint. The boatswain rams a second peg and mutters a word you put in your pocket for later when you tally fines. Hold, you sign toward the creeping elbows. Hands go wide, nobody reaches across the cord while your chalk is still talking. A farm lad tries the thesis he brought. Saying you'll row faster makes you row faster. Saying you'll drown slower makes it so. You ask without moving your head. He shrugs. The cord between you hums like the second string on a harp that knows its job is rhythm, not song. Facts become sounds. Peg taps in mist. Staff raps for measure kept. The hush horn's curt complaint. Wax blocks thudding for straps. Chalk whispering into plank grain rings to the waterline. Somewhere a gull insists on being a critic. You log verse count 0 on the tally, because the scalds don't own this morning, ale does. 2 fingers per round, 3 rounds per bench, then water and walk. You set the quiet seam with ochre dots from horn rack to skids, and teach it to the first 3 benches with your hands. Step, hold, down you sign. Step into the seam when your horn is poured. Hold your mouth, down your ale, go. You point to the chalk at the slip's lip. Set feet, breathe, shove. The law speaker's staff raps once for the drill you just stole from the oar captains and sold to the benches. The chief who cost a tide last month stares at the board. His mouth wants to be a helm. He presses it flat. His hand goes to a horn with a white tag first and doesn't reach for blue, which is all the arithmetic the river needs today. A horn clinks against another. The rack rings like glass thwarted. Hold, you sign, then down. The boatswain puts his palm on a peg and stares at the hand that wants to make a circle in the air to talk about currents. After, you say to the hand, water first. You pour yellow from the skin and make a ceremony out of it. The lad who disliked rules discovers he is good at drinking the exact water he is told to drink. It becomes a skill he might brag about when the oars are on the tholes and not a minute before. Hidden lists move under your coat. The home ganga sheet with barred provocations gets a thumb. Today's provocations are banned before they arrive. No boasting about shoves. No calling your neighbor a goat, unless the goat is in the pen and can argue. Your spare horn stops make 3 friends. Your chalk finds fine a FT, leaned across cord because a man tried to gift his pride to a neighbor, and you caught the elbow with your staff. The hush horn blows again, a low note made for morning. You see the cord slacken a breath under your hand, not the rope, the men. You tug once. The line obeys because chalk has taught it to. You bring the bench cord all the way to the skids, then lay the last ring at the waterline where boots will belong. Your quiet seam blooms, a path down which men carry their silence to the work. If it were your slipway, if a chief had cost a tide boasting of 5 oar pulls, how would you set the first? Round, water round first, or oath round first? Put your vote and where you're watching from below. I read them when the ochre dries on my knuckles and the hush horn asks if the cord belongs on the plank again. You pace the length once more. Pegs sit like tame teeth. The cord hums with attention, not appetite. The hornboard hangs where elbows must read it. The staff raps twice for measure kept. The boat's horn will soon peel out. When it does, the path from bench to boats will be painted in chalk and silence. You plant your heel at the lip, breathe the river, and tap the lad at the prow with your staff. Set feet, breathe, shove. The rest of the morning will argue with water. Your job was to make it argue with nothing else. Dew takes the slipway and treats it like its own. The bench cord is cold in your palm, pegs knock a little tune your wrist knows by heart. Routine is the law that makes tides keep promises. Before sun, peg the cord. Tap, tap, turn, tap. Run it true. No swales for pride to pool in. No proud humps for stories to trip over. Chalk the slipway rings. 1 at the skids, 1 2 paces back, 1 at the waterline where boots must remember to shut up and push. The whale rib horn rack gets its morning. Big mouths checked for stops. Blue tag oath horns hung last. Yellow tag water horns nearest the cord. Wax blocks thud on the plank. Straps get rubbed like they'll be asked for cents in a moment. Dry strap first replace Saturday slack after last winter's horn that leapt out of a wet fist and made mischief. At the horn, pour, nod, hush. At the launch, red, post tally, pace to boats. At lull, swap frayed horn straps for waxed, String a laundry rope between uprights to air spare cloaks and mitts. You draft the rota in neat chalk, hornminders forward. Hands that pour 2 fingers without decorating the tail, hush staffs to the lanes. 1 per seam to wrap measure kept into elbows. Reserves to the stern gang to widen when ordered. The law speaker's stylus whispers your 4 verbs into wax again. Pegged, poured, hushed, set by. Your job in the hour is order without sermon. Set the pouring sequence, prow bench first, stern last, mid in between, then water round, then walk. Tie-colored tags on horns where a glance does the work of a speech, white for table ale, blue for oath toast, yellow for water round. The tally stick lays grooves as honest as the tide. White, 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 yellow, pace, white, white, blue, witnesses only, hush, pace. Suspense arrives in human shoes. The provost appears with a small book that wants to be a conscience, and boots that won't learn the seam. Inspection, he says, rehearsed, eye on the cord, as if his word makes lines true. Let him through, and you stir gossip. They're cooking the pores. Bar him, and he leaves with the same sentence, salted to taste. Either way, the tide won't wait. You scrape a peg tip across the plank, threshold only, and hand him your crew book instead. Posted, read. Water first, you say. He leans, finds dew and chalk and no theater and becomes scenery without suing for a role. Someday always tips an ink pot. Today it chooses your crew book. You jam your wrist under the flood and save the page that counts. Prow, mid, stern, round 1, round 2. 3 names drown, your head writes them back, while your hand blots and your mouth moves 2 benches with finger signs. Step, hold, down. So the cord stays an idea rather than a weapon. 2 benches swap places. Habit outruns instruction. You redress the ring in shadow while a lantern crawls closer, moving men by pair and pegs so nobody loses their temper finding out you were right. The horn peals for mark. Hush rides it down the bench. Peg taps quiet themselves. You pour white into the first horn and watch the nod. Not a speech, not a grin, not a plan. The boatswain's palm lands on a peg like a period at the end of someone else's sentence. The law speaker's staff raps once for measure kept. A friar palms you a chit from the alderman, wax confusing Polish for law. Opened by order, the face lies. Closer cord for a certain tent, the whisper means. You put it in the drawer that kills paper gently and walk the rope with your eye, straight as the morning's spine. A porter tries to rent extra heads, bigger horns to a chief whose mouth has always thought size equals dignity. Your look performs arithmetic he's never liked. He remembers a different sum. White, 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 yellow, paste to boats. Wax straps don't slip. Water first, you say without moving your teeth. Men obey because the cord and the chalk took away their other choices. Blue only when the witnesses put their fingers on the horn. Oath verse is a tool, not seasoning. Horn thuds. Peg taps. The hush drapes itself where elbows would rather brag. A boy forgets and fills his chest for a claim. You tap his shoulder with your staff. Set feet. Breathe. Shove. You give him the pocket drill in the quiet seam. He looks at the chalk ring by the skids and forgives himself his opinion. The boats remember how to be boats. Read. The horn peals for the launch. You post the tally where boots have to step past it. Rounds poured, water taken, fines set by. You pace the seam to the boats, counting steps for the law speaker who prefers numbers to stories. 2 fingers, 3 rounds, water, walk. You recite like a catechism that only saves tides. Behind you, staff raps keep elbows from inventing tribes. Corruption keeps its regulars. A cousin shows a forged open by order for closer cord. The seal smells like pocket. Your palm flattens it until it learns to be furniture. Your second, secret slate burns against your ribs. 3 chiefs who never stand water round. You erase one name because last night he took yellow without looking for eyes to see him. The other 2 you carry into tomorrow like a thorn you intend to pluck when you've earned the grip. Laundry rope lifts spare cloaks to stop excuses. Wax blocks thud again. Dry strap first, you hear from 3 benches you weren't standing near. A good law travels on other people's breath. If a provost wants inside the cord to quiet rumor, would you let him inside inspection or keep him threshold only? Put your vote and where you're watching from below. I count them when the ochre dries on my knuckles, and the bench cord asks whether it belongs on the plank again. By mid-morning, the routine has trained the tide. Pegs sit like tame teeth. The cord hums with attention, not appetite. Hornboard hangs where elbows have to read it. The hush horn blows and nobody flinches. You notch the last tally groove, poured, hushed, set by, and look down the seam you painted at first light. Men carry their silence to the skids like it was a thing they were proud of not spilling. The boats push out on time. The day will argue with wind and wave, but not with itself. Frost kisses the horn rack. Thaw wakes beneath the skids. Ink in your well goes sulky and pretends the morning can't start without it. You warm wax for a stiff strap between thumb and forefinger until it remembers to be useful. Nick a clogged quill for the tally until the nib sighs into duty, then put your heel into yesterday's seam. It lies politely, top firm, under soft. The slipway intends to be treacherous and sensible at once. At the fence, a market man hires his own throat. Captains drink deep and fathers drink water. He tries it 3 ways to learn which sells best. The warden doesn't argue. He rests his palm on the bench cord, as if quiet could be nailed down. Warden's peace at the cordon, he says. Then to you, short orders that make your wrists honest. Demonstration without spectacle. Move the cord in the open. Hang oath horns last, chalk fresh on the board, firm here, danger there. No boast before rowing where boots must see it. From the church steps, the sacrist adds what your shoulders already believed. No clatter, mass. Your morning becomes a shuttle of small courtesies. Bench cord, horn rack, stern gang, back and forth until the planks decide they are being watched. You cradle spare horns under canvas so they don't look like theater. You peg where the frost stayed loyal, ease where the thaw began to lie. Stamp the seam yourself so the first boot won't be surprised. You pull the cord out in a shallow arc and pin it straight in public because geometry calms men more than speeches do. Then the choice that buys you critics, no matter how you choose. Post the cord shift first. Clean, visible arithmetic, and townsmen cry favoritism. See, captains get firm, fathers get far. Post the rotation list first. Needier, fair, and the captain fumes. You're teaching people their place matters more than their form. Meanwhile, a passerby will spy blue tag oath horns and shout cheat instead of rule if you let them look like secrets. You pick your order. Path first, promise second. Cord moved in the open, peg taps, cord hums, chalk rings down the seam, rotation posted immediately after, near benches, far benches, yellow water round where it belongs. Blue tags hang last, far end, under the line that says oaths after water with a witness mark. A clerk from the captain's table arrives with a rota torn down the spine by a thumb that wanted to be a palm. Paste, thread, the little iron he keeps under his cuff against 6 rules and a superstition. You hold a corner, he stitches the day back together. The sacrist glances over when the iron thinks about performing. No clatter, he murmurs, and the iron learns to whisper. The horn peals for mark. Hush rides it down the bench. Peg taps quiet themselves. The warden's hand remains on the cord without pressing. He lends the rope his patience, not his weight. Board, the boatswain tells you. You chalk the public plank near the bar, firm here, danger there, in a hand that refuses drama. Under it 2 neat columns the council learned last tide to trust. Horns dressed, board, stopped, strapped, and strays arrested. Words over the line. Ticks, 2 underdressed, rack front repaired, blue tags hung last. 1 under strays. Orm shouted across the seam and learned the staff rap for measure kept and mouth shut. The market man tries his myth again. Captains drink deep and fathers drink water. You let him hear the order you posted instead. Water first, witnesses after. You tell the heir where his customers stand. He finds no purchase. The cord did the argument already. A boy sags at the hush, breath getting ahead of his hands, and you steady his elbow with your sleeve and tap his shoulder twice. Set feet, breathe, shove. You give him the pocket drill in a seam meant for quiet, not heroics. He nods at the chalk ring by the skids and forgives himself his opinion. The bench cord moves another thumb outward, where the plank remembers a winter split. You do it with the rope in your hand while everyone is looking. Demonstration without spectacle. The boatswain rams a peg with his palm and doesn't look at you because he heard you not ask. Blue tag horns whisper from the rack like temptation. You leave them where the law said, last in line, under witnesses, in daylight. A passerby opens his mouth for cheat. Rule, you say without moving your teeth, and arithmetic supports you. A friar palms you a chit from the alderman, wax attempting to make a favor into a law. Opened by order, the face lies. Closer cord for a certain tent, the whisper means. You slide it under the tally where paper goes to learn patience until it dies of it. The apothecary strolls the fence selling a sentence. Peas and felt save bowels, wax saves wrists. He will be right often enough to be tolerated. You thumb wax into a strap that's stiffened in the frost and keep the morning cheap by not having to watch a horn leap from a wet fist. A priest cites chalk sigils blooming on a horn mouth and says, "No charms, device, not charm. You note in your book and wipe the marks off with vinegar." The standard answers by smelling like rosemary and quiet. The council bell lifts a hush even the gulls respect. You read the board aloud for the edge of the crowd that pretends letters are for other men. Firm here, danger there. Horns dressed. 2, strays arrested. 1, sureties for good behavior at mid-bell. No boasts before rowing, where boots can't miss it. The herald's trumpet slices rising talk into pieces too small to hire. The rotation list earns its keep almost at once. 2 benches try to swap places, habit outrunning instruction. You redress them in the shadow while a lantern crawls closer, a sleeve tug, a palm down. A quiet hold for the one who thinks volume counts as measure. The cord stays true. The tide keeps pretending it planned this. The warden leaves his palm on the rope and lets the line learn what steady feels like. The captain's eye lands on the list, then the cord, then the blue tags hung farthest from hands. He does not fume. Permission enough. You take the strap wax in one hand and the tally quill in the other and keep walking the seam. A horn thuds, a staff raps. A hush proves itself cheaper than a speech. Men pour, nod, hush, pace to boats. The yellow water horn does an honest trade where yesterday it had to teach customers. If it were your hour, if the warden ordered demonstration without spectacle, what posts first, cord first or rotation first? Put it and where you're watching from below. I read them when the wax stops sulking and the cord asks to be pegged again. By mid-morning the proof looks like furniture. The cord is where eyes watched it be moved. The oath horns hang last in the open. The board says firm here, danger there, and nobody pretends not to see it. The market man tries on a fresh myth like a cloak and discovers grief has better ears than appetite. The sacrist takes his palm off the church door. The horn peals mark. Men hush. The slipway decides to behave. Torches gutter and make the yard look smaller than it was at noon. Gates bar with that elbow-deep clunk that ends the day whether anyone agrees. Word keeps its own hours and hires a chorus as it slips past the rope. Blind rounds. Favored fletch. The square likes a rhyme when it thinks it was cheated of a nearer chord. Inside, the hall meets by candle to do what halls are good for, turn mockery into policy. The beadle taps your plank twice with a stick that believes it writes law. Copy fair, copy fast, flawless. You square the sheet. The quill behaves because your hand has learned not to consult your feelings. Public notice, quiet passage to and from the cord. You write it where boots will have to read it before mouths can improvise. Fines, called alms to keep peace with ears, for broken pegs and barred boasts. Novice bench dressed first. On paper, orders to post days range, wind, and water round at dawn so rumor wakes up unemployed. You leave small doors the town needs to breathe. Save collapse, save fever, save order under strain. Sand hisses, the line goes matte. Before it dries, a flare blooms in the shed. Orange climbs quicker than good sense. You and 2 boys are already moving. Buckets arrive in your hands like they were born there. Wet wool hisses on embered planks and the line at the gate forgets its lyrics long enough to watch flame learn manners. Rosemary and vinegar go back to their quieter work of smelling like discipline. Back at the plank, the beetle plants a knuckle in your margin. A small slip slides under your thumb with the practiced innocence of a profitable sin. Keep this quiet, the neat hand says. You tuck it under the ledger and rest your palm until paper remembers filing is a kind of death. Omit it forever, your bone tells your nerve sits. A coin rings on your plank and refuses to shine. The dead carrier's sister stands with shoulders like broom handles and a voice built to carry 5 words. Save the sick from far marks. Not loud, truer than the jeer outside. You point your pen at the clause that teaches exceptions not to breed and write what the slipway needed to learn. Sick and novice on close chord in foul wind, far only on clear. The beetle coughs at the line that will cost him a friend. You keep the curve of the S steady as if dignity could be written into vowels. Under the guest loft, a trap yawns. Men step down with private purses and come up with lighter pockets and better stories. Extra pegs, extra horns. A porter has discovered he likes counting with his palm. You lift the hatch with a peg just enough to count and close it on a promise your shoulder can pay for in the morning. 2 more pegs gone than posted. 2 fewer horns returned than sworn. The cellarer's hand lands on your shoulder with the weight of a nail. Make it wood, his thumb says. You nod. Boards can learn policy. You carry the fresh notice to the bar. Key rings stacked like teeth on the bailiff's belt chatter when the cartwheel squeals its old grievance and then purrs after someone shames it with grease. You nail the paper where hands can't pretend they weren't told. A drum under the board gives the words a spine. Suspense settles behind you like a gull. If the jeers aren't answered, the outer bar will try to be a song. If you answer wrong, your name slides onto the stone the clerk keeps oiled, to be silenced. Either way, the tide won't wait, and the company needs a dawn more than your pride. Inside, tallies of peg immersements line up under your pencil, recognizances with awkward crosses shiver into the docket. Some firm, some sideways, some made by hands that prefer tools to pens. Rosemary and vinegar steam lift the room's patience a half inch. The astrologer drifts in, declares the hour lucky if men stop talking, then pushes the lucky hour forward with his thumb when clouds thicken. Nobody pays him. He pretends the sky did. A patron's runner offers a folded chit with wax that confuses polish for law. Open by order, it claims, chin high at your margin. You set it under the same palm that smothered the beetle's slip and let paper learn to die politely. Now the contested name. It warms your pocket like a small stove. A chief whose cousin stands too often under the arch with the steward expects the close chord rotation like it were inheritance. He doesn't belong there. Another name does, the convalescent who stitched a butt in sleet without being told, the oar hand whose water round steadied 3 benches. Erase or obey. Unlock or relock. You lay the bad name on the plank over the rosemary tack and let friction pretend to be fate. You set him aside. You write the other in a hand the slipway has learned to trust and punish. Your handwriting is where mercy lives. The company will teach you later what it costs to be recognized by your letters. The beetle's cough finally locates the line that will make him defend you to men who look like his friends. The warden signs with the letter that doesn't blush. The captain scans the page, prefers arithmetic to adjectives, and nods toward the board. A friar palms you a chit from the alderman. You let him watch you file it in the drawer where paper goes to learn that patience is fatal. You return to the trap and ask the dark for arithmetic. Extra pegs? Extra horns? The porter's smile loses a tooth. You count again. 2 more gone than posted. 2 fewer returned than sworn. The cellarer's thumb presses your shoulder like a promise with hardware. Make it wood, you nod. Morning will learn carpentry. The outer bar leans again, and a herald's trumpet cuts the sound into pieces too small to hire. You read the notice aloud because policy grows up when it hears itself. Quiet passage. Fines for broken pegs and barred boasts. Novice bench dressed first. Range, wind, and water round at dawn. The market man tests favored Fletch one last time and watches the board ignore him, like old wood ignores adjectives. If it were your plank, if a sister's coin rang dull where your sand still dried, if a patron's slip asked your margin to forget itself, if a name in your pocket insisted on warmth it hadn't earned, what would you write, omit, or obey? Put it and where you're watching from below. I read them when the wax flakes from my fingers and the cord asks whether it belongs on the plank again. You knot the notice where the drum can keep it company. You file the coin in the dish that will be the only place tonight where money does what it's told. You file the chits in the drawer that kills them softly. You leave the contested name where Rosemary can keep it from sticking to your hand again. You bank the brazier. Torches gutter, gates bar. The hall smells like ink that decided to be honest and smoke that learned restraint. Outside, a company is learning quiet rules by cord and chalk instead of boast. That is the price of silence on paper, and the tide will keep the bargain. Dawn unlatches the yard. Trumpets wet their lips. Drums remember yesterday's beat and lend it back to a square that hasn't earned music yet. The velvet voice climbs its crate by the bar and nails the hour to the cord. His Grace commends those who kept quiet order on the cord. Ranges are chalked because a bargain in ink said they must be. Windows stand open not from virtue, but because a rule learned how to turn air into policy. The brazier glows the way a good tool glows, only because the order allowed it, not because anyone needs to admire it. The market man with the myth strides past the fence free as air, trying out a new sentence on the morning and deciding to save it for a paying crowd. A midwife's lintel wears a yellow tag instead of red. Someone wrote the exception, and someone else obeyed it. Near the cooper's stall, a widow folds to the cobbles. Two strangers make a chair of their hands and lift her, as if the city had rehearsed it, which it has. The velvet voice finishes the page. People accept being commended because it costs them nothing at this hour. Your errands carry edges. You are final witness and courier of consequences. First, duplicate to the warden, quiet passage to and from the cord, fines called alms to keep peace with ears for broken pegs and barred boasts, novice bench dressed first, days range, wind, and water round to be posted at dawn. He signs with the letter that doesn't blush and gives you the small look you've been earning all week. I saw. Second duplicate to the captain, the dry rota, the seam stitched by the clerk's little iron, the tally, horns dressed, strays arrested. Arithmetic she prefers to adjectives. She nods and spares you both a speech. Third to the guild, hung where money pretends to learn manners, a snowfall of paper that settles dust without cleaning blood. Over yesterday's shut-ups for false oath, a muster sheet for the king's levy is pinned, wide as appetite. Names begin to bud at the bottom where pride and debt keep their appointment. You finally understand what band boasts bought, not glamour, but obedience. Not luxury, but lanes that move, bellies steady, boats that launch on time, and a harvest of men promised for later, because a straight cord is useful to more than ships. The dry rota hangs over the board, close cord, far cord, dry strap first, with the calm you wished for last week. Vinegar coins clink in ladles at the chest, chests of fines groan into carts and purr after somebody shames the wheels with grease. A parchment marked misadventure for a slip at wet flags goes into the docket, a lie with a warm heart that keeps the morning cheap. The last rosemary bundle smolders to ash. The priest who warned off charms chalked on horns watches it die and decides to respect devices publicly for a week. Then your coat remembers it has a drawer. The secret slate of spared rotations. The 3 chiefs who didn't take their water round because you decided luck owed them interest. The side list of cords you tightened against orders in the cold hour when thaw lied under frost and sense outranked command. Leak, burn, or file. You hold both like hot bread. Leak would be honest and brief. You would be too. It would splash in the square like a good sin and die when nobody could afford to adopt it. Burn would be quick and teach you nothing but how to run colder. File is the story this corner survives by. Proof where questions with hats can find it, nowhere near mouths with errands. You slide slate and list into the drawer under the ledger and listen for the click that promises a better hour will be allowed to ask you why. File. The steward finds you as enamel always does. He offers a badge to mark more wisely, as if clarity were a party trick you refuse to perform. The guildmaster occupies the shade near your shoulder and offers sanctuary till the pest passes, the sort of dangerous kindness that fits under a cloak. The warden passes and gives you what he does best in your direction, not nothing, not much. I saw. You answer all 3 with what you own. Keys, cord, brazier, silence. Here, your wrists say. You keep your post. Public reading by the bar begins again because Velvet likes 3s. The drum puts a spine under the notice. The captain's clerk flits in to finger the knot on the rota, decides it will hold, and vanishes before the market man can hire his breath. The sacrist rubs his palm along the church door and decides the wood can keep quiet without supervision. The cellarer hisses move at a shadow out of habit. A runner from the alderman tries you with a new chit. Open by order. The wax whispers in a humbler tone than yesterday's. You rest it under your palm and let your hand decide. Omit. You chalk a dot on your wrist to remind yourself who deserves your braver voice later, the novice whose lane you dressed in sleet, and the oar hand whose cord you tightened against orders. Rules are supposed to keep people alive, not busy. If you had to choose, soft under a patron's livery or hard under sanctuary eaves, what keeps you whole, livery, or sanctuary? Put it and where you're watching from below. I count them after the last wax flake leaves my fingers, and the cord asks whether it belongs on the plank again. By noon, the extracts have turned into furniture. People lean on them and forget the time when paper had to prove itself. The levy clerk finds a way to keep his line moving without explaining his face. The market man tests a new myth and discovers grief has better ears than appetite. The board holds. The cord stays true. The line breathes without you needing to give it a mouth. Justice this week was airflow and cord budget. Mercy was policy, not indulgence. Survival was choreography of chalk, pegs, and staves, performed by people who don't need to be sung about to do it again. You were the hinge. You coil the slack. You pocket the keys. You bank the brazier. The horn will say mark, the hush horn will say hush, and the cord will mean out. The tide will keep its bargain if you keep yours.